My name is Anita Verna-Crofts. We are so delighted to have you all here. I have been teaching with the Communication Leadership Graduate Program for over 15 years. I currently serve as artist in residence, and the career panel is one of my all-time favorite parts of each year. I so enjoy hosting this panel. I see it as an opportunity to share with so many people the kind of amazing work that the alumni of our program do and how professional communications is a part of their career. So before we get started with that, with the panel, and I know you're all excited to hear from the three illustrious alums of the graduate program here on the Zoom screen, I'd also encourage folks to use the chat. Tell us where you're coming in from. Please let us know where you're joining from. And also, as we move through the program today, my hope is to spend about a half an hour engaging our panel in conversation. And then that will reserve about 20 minutes where I'm going to be going to the chat and hoping to ask questions that you all pose. So as you listen to their answers, as we engage in the conversation, please do put your questions into the chat, and I will be monitoring them and then devoting some time at the end to make sure that we've got an opportunity for that back and forth. If you would like to ask a particular question of a panelist, you are more than welcome to do so. You're also more than welcome to ask questions that have a more universal appeal. Either are absolutely fine. And so through the course of our time today, we're going to be not only having a conversation with our three alums, but there will be some links that will be shared in the chat box as well, because if you are new to the Comm Lead program, as this is one of the first times you're learning more about us, we are a professional graduate program at the University of Washington. We have over 50 faculty that teach across 3 different degrees. The degree is a master's in communication with 3 specific emphases. We do a master's of communication in digital media, a master's of communication in communities and networks, and then a master of communication in communication leadership. And I'm excited to say that if you are interested in learning more about the program after this career panel, there is an open house on November 12th, and we will be dropping some information about that in the chat so that you can come and learn more. So that's something that if we whet your appetite in this career panel, do not hesitate to join that open house on the 12th. And Lynn, our wonderful Zoom DJ, thank you for dropping that in. And I'm excited to see the chat starting to percolate. And again, inviting those that just joined to introduce yourself, let us know where you're joining us from. And also, by all means, pose those questions in the chat so that we can open them up in the latter half of our hour together here. So thank you again for coming. As you know, this is a panel looking at career paths in communications, which is an intentionally broad title in order to then engage in conversations with some of the alumni from our Communication Leadership Graduate Program who are doing a real range of things. And it is my pleasure now to move towards some short introductions so that before we engage in that quick Q&A back and forth, you have a sense of the 3 illustrious alums of the program who are here on the Zoom screen. And I'd love to do this in a way that we move from Chelsea, and I think I've got Casey coming up after that, and then Stacia will end with you in terms of the introductions. And for these introductions, Chelsea, we'll start with you. Chelsea is Chelsea Pohl. Thank you very much for being here. Is a communication director at Microsoft and started with the Comm Lead program, I believe, in 2012, if I have that right. Chelsea, unbelievable. I remember working with Chelsea in 2012. And Chelsea, for the purposes of introductions, could you share with us your undergraduate degree, because many of our audience members are currently undergraduates. So your undergraduate degree, which track you pursued at Comm Lead, and then if you've got a particularly memorable project or initiative or experience that was part of your Comm Lead time, we'd love to hear that too as a means of getting to know you a little bit. So Chelsea, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Anita. I remember meeting you as well. Thank you for your encouragement to apply. It's one of the best decisions that I've made. So, hi everyone, my name is Chelsea Pohl. My undergraduate was in communication, so I decided to continue in that track. I focused on the Masters of Communication in Digital Media program, and my favorite class that still sticks with me to this day and is perhaps even more relevant in today's very dynamic, fast changing environment is Rob Salkowitz's class on the future of marketing.
Mm.
And he had this great lesson and book that we all read called The Art of the Long View.
Mm.
It's about really taking this strategic mindset to scenario planning for the future and looking at those dynamics that are going to impact what possible scenarios you might find your business in the future. So looking at different driving forces like societal forces, economic forces, technological shifts, environmental shifts, political shifts. And boy, does that feel more relevant than ever.
Yeah.
So that's one that's really stuck with me.
Absolutely. I can imagine that any course that has future in the title, you were there, in 2012. It's amazing, I'm sure, to apply what you learned in that class as you've continued to move through your career. So I look forward to getting into that as we have those Q&A opportunities with the three of you. So thanks, Chelsea, for being here. Next, I'd love to have Casey's son introduce himself. Casey's a UX designer at Amazon. And Casey, just like Chelsea did, can you share with us your undergraduate degree, which track you pursued at Comm Lead? And then you too, we'd love to hear about something memorable that you took out of the graduate program in terms of thinking about professional communications.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Anita, for the introduction. I think I also took your class, so I still remember that. Yeah, my undergrad major, I was with the iSchool, so our iSchool at UW. So my major was informatics at that time, and I had a focus of the human-computer interaction. And for Comm Lead, I pursued the digital media track as well. And one of my favorite classes that is memorable is the video editing class with Jacob. I remember at that time, I was actually his first cohort, so it was his first time teaching that class, and I think right now is going to his like 11th or 12th cohort. It's an absolute popular class, and at that time, I didn't really know anything about video editing. I knew a little bit about design, but nothing about video editing. Um, and like I didn't know the tools, I didn't know the process, but it was a really fun class, and we did a lot of like little video shooting, very technical, but also just very fun at the same time. And right now I even have my own like YouTube channel. I don't have a lot of followers, but that just show you that at Comm Lead that you can have a focus. If for
Mm.
me, my focus is like UX design, but at the same time, Comm Lead allows you to kind of like branch off to explore other like new things, other topics. So that's definitely I would say one of the most valuable classes that I took.
That's wonderful, Casey. I think that also speaks at a more macro level to how expansive the field of communication is. It's reflected in our curriculum, but it's also reflected in the kind of careers the three of you have pursued. And so you've really tapped into a theme that I'm going to enjoy pushing it a bit, the way in which communication can take so many different shapes and forms, both in graduate school, but then also professionally in your careers. So appreciate you mentioning that. Thank you, Casey. Welcome. Now, last but not least, we have Stacia Espinoza, who is the Director for Legislative and External Affairs at the City of Seattle, the great City of Seattle. And I believe you started Comm Lead in 2023. Is that correct?
I did.
Yes. And so, Stacia, thanks for being here. Same trio of questions to you. Welcome.
Yeah, and to your earlier point around there are so many different directions that you can go in the field of communications. I actually have a little bit of change in career status since being at the City of Seattle. So my name is Stacia Espinosa, and I'm currently the Director of Communications and Strategy at the Governor's Office of Financial Management. In that role, I serve as sort of his spokesperson on everything fiscal and tax policy. I've been in government for about 15 years now, and I have served at every level of government. And for me, I started off with this deep interest in healthcare. I went to UW and major in my undergrad was healthcare leadership, but I ended up taking an internship at our state legislature, which really exposed me to this idea of policy and communications as the main levers for transformation in the societies that we live in. So after that, I spent a couple more years in government, and then in 2023 started at Comm Lead, where I took the track for digital media. for me, even though I'd been in the field for quite some time, I really started to see how rhetoric and public communications, whether misinformation, disinformation, or the real deal, really, really shapes the pace of policy and sort of the fabric of our society in quicker ways. So I wanted to learn some more tactical skills on how to do that,
Yeah.
which is why my favorite course within the program was Sam Ting's social media policy. And in that program, he really took the, I'm a millennial, a baby millennial, so I grew up in the era of like light coding of MySpace, right? And so I thought I had some understanding of social media and how to leverage that in communications. But Sam Ting's class really took the science of how do you build a calendar, an editorial calendar of events, and how do you engage with your audiences in different ways. So for those of you who are either looking at Comm Lead or currently in Comm Lead, highly recommend taking his class.
Nice. Thank you so much, Stacia. And thanks for the update on, I mean, it's just exciting to see how you've continued to lead within the city of Seattle and making those connections, and much appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, all three of you, and joining us for this conversation. So you can now, for the attendees, you can see this kind of monster talent we've got here. And now what I'd like to do is, we've got a number of questions. These questions are ones where it's intended to bring forward some reflection on all three of your parts in terms of your current careers and the application of various skills and techniques and strategies when it comes to the world of communications. And so what I'd like to do is start with, how long, I mean, this is a more general setting question, interested in your time in the workforce. If you could give us a little bit more of a sense of your current role. Stacia, for instance, you did a great job really teeing us off in that way in your introduction. So give the attendees here a sense of your current role, how long you've been in the workforce, and to the extent that you might be able to paint a little picture for us about the day-to-day role that you have, what it looks like, and what you found to be perhaps most essential, each of you, in navigating the position and succeeding in the position that you have now. And what I'd like to do is start with you, Casey. And I should have mentioned, Casey started the program in 2022. I think I've got that right, Casey. I meant to mention that when you were introduced. But Casey, could you kick us off with this more descriptive question to give a window into your current role, the day-to-day, and the kind of essential skills that you feel make you successful in this particular communications role?
Yeah, thanks, Anita. I actually started in 2020, but I feel like that's
2020,
close
so
enough.
sorry. Okay, I
No,
stand
no
corrected.
worry at all.
Great, thank you.
I would say that if internship counts, then I would say I've about 6 years of experience in the workforce.
Got it.
Like you
Got
mentioned
it.
previously, I'm a UX designer at Amazon and currently supporting their B2B effort because they have the Amazon that we all buy stuff from, but there's also a counterpart Amazon business that basically targeting the B2B side. So I work on that side. And I would say every day looks a little bit different, but it generally consists of like two components. So first one is like meetings with stakeholders, and the second part just like has downtime working on design. I would say a lot of meetings, a lot of alignment time with different cross-functional team. Design actually doesn't take as much time because I remember when I was a student, most of my time was actually on like design, pushing pixel on Figma. But in reality, like figuring out like what to build and why we build it and the timeline and everything. So the communication part is actually super key, and the design part just like come naturally. And I work closely with just some of the functions I work with include product manager, developers, marketing, and sometimes like legal, and also researchers. So a lot of different functions. In terms of like skills that I think is important or can make this role successful is one, like just communication. You got to be able to like clearly articulate your thoughts and rationale. And sometimes when people have like divergent opinion, you need to be like dare to push back. And so communication is definitely important. And also just like navigating ambiguity because things do change very frequently. Sometimes if you're working on a project and you feel like you have a very clear path forward, but suddenly there's like a mandate from the leadership or some other forces that can pivot your whole thing. So being able to like navigate ambiguity in a not as clear kind of environment is also really key. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Casey. Was taking some notes because there were just wonderful themes that you brought up, and appreciate that answer. Chelsea, how about you?
Lots of similarities in building on Casey. So I've been in the workforce for 15 years, at Microsoft the last 10. And my role is in public relations. And so we're kind of the last mile for communicating what the company has been up to in terms of product innovations, in terms of commitments and priorities to key audiences. So we're always thinking about our audiences when we develop our announcements and work really closely with our internal stakeholders on who is it that we are trying to reach to determine the best avenue, and what we want to get across. In the last 6 months, I took on the role of leading our global media strategy and campaigns team. And so that builds on about 9 years of work in product communications at Microsoft. And now I'm in this position of looking more left to right across the various businesses Microsoft has, and really scaling our message to audiences in all of our key markets. So that's been a big learning curve, and one where, so much context and audience first thinking is important. What Casey said about navigating ambiguity and kind of the pace of change is definitely part of what me and my team deal with on a daily basis. And I love the discipline of PR because it really does bring together, the business, the strategy, and you get to be kind of this simplifier on top of a lot of information and distill it into, the one or two things that people need to remember. So my days can look like, executive preps, strategy sessions, brainstorms, meeting with reporters and influencers, creating demo content, hosting creators in various locations, working on reactive media cycles and issues. So really, it's a variety of things. And when you boil it down, what do you need to be successful as a communicator? It comes down to, critical thinking, problem solving, dot connecting, and influence. There's a lot of soft skills. We're using a ton of AI in how we get our work done, and happy to dig into that a bit later. But the things that we're going to do uniquely is like distill the message, connect the dots, have the relationships to reach the outcomes we're trying to drive.
Yeah. Thank you, Chelsea. Much appreciated. And so let's go now to Stacia, and we're moving away from the private sector. We were delighted to be able to have Stacia for a number of reasons, but one is I think it's important to represent the fact that there are multiple sectors where comms are vital, and the public sector is one of them. So Stacia.
Thank you for that. Yes, love the public sector. Highly encourage everyone to consider the opportunity of serving your neighborhoods and communities around you and the use of communications. So as I said earlier, I serve as the governor's spokesperson for everything with tax and fiscal policy. So everything in Washington state costs something. Sometimes that's paid for by philanthropy, by corporate, but generally there's a mix of public dollars into it. For those of you who are students at UW, the state is a huge partner in making sure the funding behind UW continues to succeed and deliver the quality education that you're receiving. My everyday can look a little bit different and a little bit similar, like Casey and Chelsea's. Within the government sector, we don't have large teams, and so I'm often the media person. I'm often the audience connector, and many times, unfortunately, I'm often the design person, working on my Canvas skills. And so my everyday looks very much, you know, according to what are you seeing in the news? And that sort of drives the cycle of what I'm focused on for the day and what I'm driving my team to. Right now, we're in the middle of a federal shutdown. So a lot of my conversations have looked like community engagement, reaching out to different audiences in Spokane, in Seattle, in Okanagan, and being like, hey, how is this showing up for you? If federal SNAP, WIC, food benefit dollars go away, what's the message we need to be aligned on, and how can we support you? And so I think that pivots me next to kind of the essential skills. If you're newer in your career, or really even if you're seasoned, I think there's a common thread there, but I'll speak to the ones that I look for when I'm hiring, regardless of if you're coming into an entry level, mid level, or senior level role. I'm always looking for someone who has a demonstrated experience of project management. Do you know how to see a campaign from beginning to end? It's one thing to know how to make a really cool Canva design or a video or to talk really smoothly. It's another thing to be able to make that campaign be successful from beginning to end. And that's where communications can really come in and make everybody around sort of rally around those North Stars. So that's my first thing that I look for when I'm hiring folks. The other thing I would say is a willingness to ask the right questions.
Mm.
Communications is often, as you'll find in your careers, brought into this space too late to be impactful.
Yeah.
But if given the opportunity to be at the front end of the conversation, or, you know, to just sort of reset the conversation around comms for anything, to me, I always ask my staff to think about these three things. What do we want our audience to know? What do we want them to do? And what do we want them to feel? I feel like it's our jobs as communicators to really succinctly boil that down and build campaigns, engagements, or whatever around those things. So I know we're short on time. I'll pause there. Thank you, Anita.
No, this is wonderful. These are all three of you. Thank you for those thoughtful introductions that expanded on just the nuts and bolts of who you are, but now have given the attendees a richer sense of what you do and skills that are required. So thank you for that. I can imagine, given the nature of our audience, people who are perhaps in those more nascent stages of career journey, I don't know about all of you, but I've heard a lot about how hard the job market is now. And it's not just hearsay, like it's real. The job market is harder, and younger generation this is international, but certainly domestically here in the States, it's a challenge. And so I can sometimes I remember when I was in my earliest stages of developing a career, it really helped me hear from others who were farther along in it, how they'd landed their jobs, but and I don't mean it that so succinctly, but even just like tell us a little bit about how it is that you came to this position, beyond just potentially the idea of personal connections, because we know that the relationships that we develop are crucial. And so would be happy to hear people speak about that. But what are some other strategies that you brought to the way in which each of you has arrived at the role that you have now? Some of you, like Chelsea, I mean, you've been at Microsoft for many, many years. Perhaps this role that you currently have is a newer one. Stacia, it also sounds like you've recently shifted roles. So really curious to hear, and let's start with Chelsea, and then we'll have Stacia, and we'll end with you, Casey. Just give some actionable, if you can, and clear recollections for how you would describe the way in which you were able to acquire the kind of role that you have right now.
Yeah. Such an important question. I'm really glad we're covering this. And I relate. I graduated in 2010. It was a recession.
Yeah.
It was tough.
Yes.
And I attribute my landing that first position at a PR agency, Edelman, to being very proactive and finding ways to be memorable. So I really set my sights on a few key agencies I knew would be important to have experience at, that were reputable and had interesting client work. So I set an ambitious goal. And then I approached that goal like a full-time job. And I, was proactive in finding, happy hours that they were hosting and who I knew connected to folks who worked there, um, and eventually got some informational interviews, which got me to HR contacts and really just figuring out who's making decisions, how many touch points at this organization can I have? So people know when they see a position open, they think of me, or when they see my resume come across, they know my name.
Yeah.
So extremely helpful. It got to a point with the Portland office where, they were just like, we really want to help you, but we just don't have anything opening soon. But you know what? Our Seattle office does, and they have a position open now. And so, the move from Portland to Seattle is not significant for many, but for me, who grew up very close to home, that was a big leap, but I was willing to do it. And so that got my foot in the door there for the interview loop, which led to an offer. And so that was proactivity. And in terms of being memorable, really work on your personal story. Like, what is it about you um, that sets you apart? In this era of AI, in particular, starting your careers, expertise is not a big differentiator. Information is abundant, and we have tools that help us. But navigating ambiguity, solving problems, connecting dots, being proactive and creative and eager and ambitious are. So, what are some ways that you can connect those qualities to what you can offer an organization and why you're interested in that opportunity would be my advice.
Thank you, Chelsea. Stacia.
I loved so much of what Chelsea said, especially the part about being memorable. Um, One of the first things I would say here is always try to make that memory, always try to make somebody's life easier, always lead with gratitude. Those things are really important to navigating careers and making an impression on people where when they have a job open, maybe they're not going to immediately direct or point you to that, but maybe they'll think about sending that job posting to you. And that can be a huge difference. Um, some other things that come to mind as to like how I got to where I am. One, always stay interested in learning, both in what's happening in the world. How can you engage in the hottest topics right now that people are talking about, that people are concerned about? That will give you a repertoire of skills that are both useful and modern. I think we often, Anita, as your remarks queued up, getting to know people is an important part of landing a great job. And for me, having fellowship, cohorts, learning experiences outside of the education system is really, really important to getting to know people who are moving and shaking, or at least people who have that same hunger for you as you to succeed. And then the last thing is also really tactical. For me, I have always been driven by a couple career interests, and I am so nerdy that I track that in Excel sheets. I've got like 2030, 2031, 2032, just ideas of different things that I want to pursue. And that helps me stay grounded as there are so many things that are evolving in our world with AI and politics. All of that is great to engage with, but having your North Star as for what do you want to impact, what's your legacy, is so important, and not getting lost in the noise or overwhelm or burnout that is rampant in our field. And then the last thing I'll leave you with, I promise, with the gift of social media and LinkedIn, reverse engineering your career is something that is so important. If you don't know exactly where you want to go, just start putting it in LinkedIn. Like, how cool would it be to be comms at the United Nations? Or how cool it would be to be comms at the governor's office or UW. Find who those people are and how they got there, and then start reverse engineering. How can you take the steps to get to where you can see yourself being?
Thank you, Stacia. Casey, how about you?
Yeah, thank you both for sharing. I feel like I'm about to repeat a lot of what you just said, but similar to Chelsea, I also graduated into a challenging time. That was beginning with COVID.
Yeah.
And I remember the landscape, the user experience industry really has changed like after COVID, and companies nowadays are like very cautious and about like investing and about hiring. And the competition does seem like intense. I would say like one of the biggest challenge that I face was like getting rejected at a final round, like after 5 to 6 rounds of interview, and sometimes I have self-doubts after like keep seeing rejection letters. But I would say that number one is like to a certain extent, you do gotta be resilient and keep
Yeah.
just like chugging along because sometimes you have connection, but sometimes you don't. And for my like the Amazon job that I got earlier this year, like I just applied on LinkedIn. So keep looking, keep open-minded, and keep applying, and also know your strengths and kind of like
Please frozen. Oh, now you're back.
Absolutely.
Now you're back, Casey. Sorry, we lost you there for just a second.
where did you folks lost me?
Oh,
Lost me
like
again.
just 7 seconds ago.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'm gonna speak a couple of the bullet points I wrote here. So
Perfect.
the number one is to a certain extent, you gotta be like resilient and just like, you know, keep applying, keep looking, keep open-minded. And then you also need to know your strengths and area of like improvement. Like hiring team want to see that you have a plan for yourself. Uh, so that you know like where you can keep learning, keep growing, and sometimes you probably even need to have like a some sort of mechanism to say that, hey, I want to keep learning on XYZ in order
Right.
to meet that gap to work
Right.
backward. And the last point I want to mention is just like personal branding. Like,
Mm.
is your LinkedIn and resume or other public presence, are they telling the same like cohesive story? I
Mhm.
think that can also contribute to how people will memorize your
Yeah.
presence.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Casey. Appreciate that. Being mindful of time, I'm going to ask that this next question, we almost treat it like a speed round in terms of being succinct. And this is not a criticism of your earlier answers. Your earlier answers have been phenomenal. I just know that this hour goes quickly and people have work that needs to be done. So I'm going to ask, is there something that you wish you'd known earlier, where you are now in your career? Is there something you wish you'd learned earlier that you think would be useful to share to this population listening here who are in that earlier stage of career development? What's something that you wish you had known earlier? Stacia, we'll start with you, then go to Casey, and then we'll end with Chelsea.
Yeah, confidence is key to success, and confidence is an external, it's having a stack of proof and evidence you generate yourself every day that you are who you say you are.
Nice. Thank you, Stacia. Casey.
Yeah, I'm about to say something that sounds counterintuitive, which is you don't need to be perfect, right? Like done is better than perfect. Whether it's like building a portfolio, because I know people who wait until their portfolio to be quote unquote like perfect in order to apply. We shouldn't do that. And also in jobs, like no one's gonna wait until you have a perfect thing because things are gonna change, things gonna iterate. So you just get started and keep working at it. Don't worry about it being perfect.
Excellent. Thank you, Casey. Chelsea, how about you for this question?
Mastery is boring. Embrace discomfort.
I love it. Someone should be dropping these into the chat.
Yes.
Wonderful. No,
Yes.
I feel like these are three wonderful truth bombs that just landed. And thank you all. You heard my memo and you acted on it perfectly. So that was great. This gives us some now breathing room for this. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap with this question here because I want to give you time to be able to ask it. And I've also seen that we just got some terrific questions in the chat, and I want to make sure we have some time for as many of those as possible. And this is the question that I ended with in my prep with all of you, which is, could you share some valuable job search related tip or advice that somebody gave you that you have found has helped you as you've moved through your career? And I realize that this builds off of our second to, the question you asked before this last one. But I really think that it can be helpful at again, that nascent stage of career, to each hear from the three of you, to hear from each of the three of you about valuable advice you got that you have felt has stood the test of time, no matter where you are in your career. What would be the answer that you give to that? And Chelsea, let's start with you, and then we'll go to Stacia, and we'll end with Casey.
Okay, someone will have to fact check me on where this quote came from, but it's, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. And so we'll always find an excuse to say we're not qualified enough, don't have enough experience, or that opportunity, they'll never choose me for that one. And maybe you don't get it, but I've had some great steps in my career by taking those shots and signaling my intent. So, moving from an individual contributor to a manager took a few cycles, but because I went for the role early, I went for the people role early, and that got on people's minds. Chelsea is ready to become a manager. She's got the intent, and we've seen her work leading up to this, and she's spoken now with 5 people in this interview loop about her experience and her readiness for this. So now I'm on folks' minds, and that set me up for the next step. So always take the shot, because even if you don't get it the first time, you're signaling your intent for that layup or whatever the sports metaphor.
Whatever metaphor you want to, whatever shot it is, the goal, the basket, the run.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
pick your sports.
Exactly.
Thanks, Chelsea. Stacia.
I don't know who said it, Chelsea, but I'm just gonna go ahead and assume that was a great Kobe quote. For me, the cold calling and cold emailing for job connections is great, but the thing that really changed it and stuck with me is at the end of your emails, add some thoughtful questions. So it's not just another, hey, how are ya? Can we grab coffee? It's, hey, how are ya? I saw you did this thing. I'm curious about X. Could we talk about that?
Wonderful. Casey.
I'll just say like start early, like because sometimes things can really take like longer than you think, and know the timeline. Because I know for internship and sometimes like new grad hiring, they do have like a certain timeline. So work backward from that timeline, and each company does have like a little difference in terms of timeline. So you can search online or ask people to figure that out, and then just start gathering your data point, whether it is project, whether it's your design or whether it's example for the behavior questions interviews. Yeah,
Yeah.
start early.
Excellent. Thanks, Casey. And Casey, there's a question in the chat about your YouTube channel. So if you would like to find that and drop that in, I just wanted to flag that for you. Now I'm going to turn to some questions. Some of them are specific to an individual. Others perhaps will be a little bit more general. Chelsea, you had mentioned AI, and I think it would be interesting to hear, especially how much this is a panel about careers in communication and artificial intelligence, and the opportunities, the affordances, the constraints that it provides, I think are important to bring into this conversation. Do you want to talk just briefly about the way that you see it impacting your work and and pulling it up so it can be something that we bring forward into the conversation in terms of careers in communication and the rise of AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So we obviously have an offering for AI at work solutions called M365 Copilot. And we, as Microsoft in communications, are, as much as we're sharing this with the world, we are customer zero as well. And we're looking at, every kind of piece of workflow. What is the human role, the director of work, and then what is the AI assistance for that? And so in the very specific domain space that I'm in, working with reporters, crafting messages, there's various pieces of content that we're creating along the way. We're getting, what we call briefing sheets together for executives ahead of meetings. And we're synthesizing a lot of different campaign materials, et cetera. And so we're creating some of these more simple agents that sit on top of content to help us quickly grasp key insights. We're leveraging our Copilot in Word and PowerPoint and Outlook to help us never really start with a blank page and get that first spark on the page. And then, we report a lot of the work that we do internally as well. And so AI has been a huge time saver in terms of sharing the coverage outcomes from our efforts back to the business internally, synthesizing results and insights so that we can actually spend more time on driving those outputs. So those are a few examples.
Thank you, Chelsea. And Maya, thank you for that question. There's a question also that Rainey brought in here that I wanted to ask to all three of you, because I couldn't agree more. The three of you each have a confidence and a clarity in the way that you communicate. You're all very well prepared. You're all very well spoken. And I appreciated Rainey's question about what's one thing you do to practice communication skills to sound smarter and clearer during work. So this is not about how we write or how we present ourselves in a computer mediated way, but what are some strategies? What's one thing each of you thinks about in the way that you present yourself in person in work? And I'm happy to have any of you answer first, and we'll just go through.
Casey, I saw you just come off mute. Go for it.
Well, go ahead, Casey, and then we'll go to
Sure.
Chelsea and then Stacia.
Yeah, I would say that confidence is definitely something that takes time. I didn't have as much of confidence when I started my career, but I think like once I guess it takes time, and when you get like accolades, when people start to see your value, your confidence level will go up, and just like being intentional about it, like about being confident. In terms of like public speaking, I would say that just I'm not one of those people who can just like open their mouth and just wing it. I have many colleagues who can do that. It's not one of my bread and butter. I would say just start with speaker notes, and you don't have to read all of them. Just like draw down some bullets, and that can make sure that you don't forget what you want to say. And over time, maybe you practice that so that you don't need to read anymore. But you can definitely start with speaker notes.
Thanks, Casey. Chelsea.
One of my favorite prep techniques is to think about the audience and anticipate their questions, because most nerves and lack of confidence come from anticipating questions you cannot answer or worrying about questions you won't be able to answer. So if you can do the homework ahead of time to think about the hardest question you think you'll get and prepare for that in advance, I guarantee you'll see a boost in confidence. The other thing I would say, and this is something we share with our executives in media training, is embrace the period, not the comma, meaning deliver a complete thought. Don't try to cram 5 complete thoughts into one sentence.
I love it. Embrace the period, not the comma. There's so many great truth bombs all that you're delivering. Appreciate that. Stacia, how about you? Oh, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah,
There
thank
we
you.
go.
I love that. That's also going to be my next forehead tattoo. So like I want to name a couple of things. Confidence and sounding clear and succinct changes based off of who you are and the kind of rooms you're moving in. A lot of intersectional identities is going to show up in this space. So I would say, as a person whose English is not my first language, and yet I have a role that's tied to communications, and I'm often moving in spaces where I don't see a lot of folks who look like me in that. confidence and speaking clearly is about my preparation for that meeting. I don't take any meeting nowadays without an agenda attached to the meeting invite. I want to know what we're talking about so that I can come prepared to the conversation and we can all make best use of our time together. Even if somebody doesn't give me an agenda, I'll send them a Teams chat. I'll send their EA a quick message to say, hey, what is this about? So that I can come ready and come up with a couple, again, thoughtful questions that I want to ask. There's two more points I'll make quickly here. If you haven't heard of it yet, SBAR, situation, background, action, recommendation, that is a fantastic way of quickly debriefing something complicated to busy executives who don't have a whole lot of time to listen and ask you all the questions they need to ask. So look that up, study that, and whenever you're caught off guard, think SBAR, walk through those letters, and if you can deliver on that, at least you know you got what you needed across. And remember, I had a third, but I don't remember what it was. So I'll pause there. Thank you.
No problem. Well, Stacia, I had a follow-up question for you that came from the chat, but after you finish answering that, please do drop SBAR into the chat, because that I have not heard of that before, and yet it sounds very actionable in terms of the way that we can prepare, and preparation and practice. Wow, there's those two things that is a theme that all three of you spoke to. Is it takes time, and I would also say, look to the people that you admire within your workspaces in terms of their communication styles, and emulate. That's often something that I did in those nascent stages in my career. Stacia, question for you from Matthew Dyer. When you have to communicate a tough or unfavorable message, how do you know when the message is clear but also showing empathy?
Oh, that is such a good question. Whew. It's been a rough couple of years in government, but especially it's been a last 9 months that feels like a last 100 years. For me, I go back to what I shared earlier around what are those three things that we want our audience to know, feel, and do. Clear is kind. So the clearer we can get about our messages and tie those back to those three things, to me, that's how we make sure that we are holding people with empathy and moving through those spaces. I also, as you know, a person coming from different backgrounds, I make a point to connect with my community members and partners of influence before we're sending any message out from the governor's office, to make sure they get an early heads up on what we're saying, and also so that they can pull our coattails if we're using outdated language. Like stakeholders is an offensive word to our tribal communities here. It's partners. Those kind of like continuing to interact with different people is so important. And the last thing I'd say to that is, not only does doing the community engagement piece or checking with your audience before you do the full preview is important to refining the message, but when you've got to bring that up and run that up 50 levels of approval, if you can say, hey, I've checked with these folks over here and they feel really strongly about this, so let's use our platform to speak to that, that helps you, again, keep the message clear and lead with empathy.
Thanks, Stacia. Casey, I'm going to come to you next, because you were job searching, I would say, that most recent out of the three. And there's a question from Yen Yang. Oh, no, let's see. Let me make sure I'm going to find it, because there was a couple questions actually, sorry, from Maitri around the way in which we put together our assets, our resume, the way that we put forward who we are. And in the conversation that we had earlier, we've talked about curating a LinkedIn page, making sure you mentioned alignment between the channels that represent who you are. But could you talk a little bit, there's a question here from your journey, what suggestions would you give on making sure the resume covers everything that makes our profile stand out, including unique points, but isn't too overwhelming visually? You're a designer, so I'd love to hear what you have to say about this, Casey.
I would say take my advice with a grain of salt, because like designers' resume do usually look different from like non-designers' resume. Designers' resume
Sure.
do tend to have a little bit of colors. So if you're not sure, look up some other people's resume of the roles that you want to get. And in terms of like key points on a resume, I would say, as far as my experience go, just trying to like have a focus. So for example, if I want to find a designer role, try not to put like other roles that are not relevant. Maybe you've done some other work that is, completely different, or like you pivot from other things. Just try to make that connection, not just like put something completely irrelevant. Because right now I feel like instead of like being well-rounded, the world actually prefer like specialist. But I know some people might disagree with me, but that's like my experience. And another thing I would say is for your resume, just trying to put the impact of the work. Don't just describe the responsibilities, because anyone can write, the job description basically. Oh, I did XYZ, but like anyone can do wireframe, anyone can push pixels, but like what is the impact of your design? What is the impact of your project? I think you need to really show that, whether it's like you save time, you help them earn money, you increase conversion, or some other measurements. There are different ways to do it, but show that
Yeah.
impact.
And I'm going to build off of that with Chelsea and Stacia. I think you've been on the other side hiring people, and so you're looking at people's assets and resumes. Are there things that you might offer, especially given that you're all three of you are now, working in the field of communications? What stands out for you in app? Can you think of examples of things that stand out for you in applicants, whether or not it's in writing or in that hiring process, in that interview process? Are there things that you might offer up the audience that might help in that career journey that people are on?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I would offer. The first is every time you do an interview or informational coffee or something, send a thank you email as soon as you can. That makes a huge difference in people feeling like you really valued the time. And if you can throw in, what were your takeaways? They're like, oh, this person is smart and was listening. I'll keep an eye out for them. And the second thing, when it comes to like actual assets, for me, I don't need to see a really designed thing. And we use technology that strips a lot of pronouns and different things out of it. So I don't know if your design content will actually make it across the ATS. That said, one strategy to work with that is you can find the hiring manager's email, send them a copy of your resume, and especially in an environment that doesn't require cover letter, send them a cover letter. It shows your writing skill, it shows your storytelling skill, and it's also one way to help stand out a little bit.
Yeah. Thanks, Stacia.
Building on that, I agree, the personal touch. So if it's a resume, I like a personal statement, something quick just to get a sense of who you are and what interests you about this role, and make it specific to the role. Hiring managers are not oblivious to the fact that you are reaching out to many different companies, particular in this market. So going the extra mile to personalize the resume and the outreach. And if you can find someone who can make an introduction to the hiring manager or write a personalized LinkedIn message, I do think that goes a long way, again, of being memorable, showing your interest, showing you're proactive.
Absolutely good. Thank you. Chelsea, I'll keep building off of you. I believe there was a question that was asking about how the move for you going global has perhaps changed the nature of your work. And I think this is a larger question when it comes to the field of communications. We live in a world of distributed teams and a sense of a global mindset is a big part of the Comm Lead program and the kind of curriculum that we create. So in your particular example here with your work at Microsoft, how has that global dimension to your new role shifted the kind of perhaps skills or strategies that you employ in terms of the role?
Yes, I am currently reading a fantastic book called The Culture Map. So this is a great one that was recommended to me. I'm working through it, and it essentially provides context on ways different cultures approach communications and what is being said without being said. So some cultures are high context, some are low context, some are hierarchical, some are not. And so that's been really helpful in just working with my colleagues and understanding as we collaborate, kind of the message behind the message, if you will. And then from a discipline perspective, I went from being an expert in our solutions for Azure and business applications and M365 to having this kind of horizontal view of everything we're announcing. And it's created a lot of empathy for my colleagues in market who are absorbing a lot of this and figuring out how to best, tell Microsoft's story when we have, on a day like today, for example, we announced our digital defense report, which is more of a state of cyber threats and nation state attacks, as well as our Windows Copilot news today. So that's just October 16th. So when you think about this message traveling from Redmond, Washington to Japan or Korea or the UK, there's a lot of different considerations we have on, the media market being able to absorb this and what actually do we need to land to help position Microsoft as an innovative and trusted partner in these markets. So that's kind of the mental model that I'm now operating in.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, we are nearing the top of the hour, and I want to make sure that we can wrap up this conversation, not only in a timely manner, but in a way that also offers an opportunity for continued connection beyond the hour that this panel took place. And what I'd first like to do is thank all three of you so much for your time, for these tremendous answers and provocative answers and thoughtful answers. And I also wanted to let everybody on the call know that Lynn's going to be dropping your LinkedIn URLs for Casey, for Chelsea, for Stacia. And if we didn't get to your question, I would encourage you to connect with Casey and with Chelsea and with Stacia on LinkedIn and make that overture personable. Don't just request a connection. Use the opportunity to introduce yourself, mention that you were able to hear them on the panel, and hopefully there would then be a subsequent chance for you to ask that question that you had for them. I'll also say that the Comm Lead program would also be happy to hear from you if you've got follow-up in terms of more general questions about the program, how our opportunities at Comm Lead might align with your career objectives. And as I said earlier, and for those that perhaps joined a bit later, we are having an open house as a graduate program on November 12th. That link will also be dropped into the chat. And so please take an opportunity if you have more questions to attend that as well. I believe we are also going to put our YouTube channel into the chat, and that has that provides attendees here a chance to see some of our faculty in action, the kind of work that our students have done over the years. You want to sign up for our newsletter. That's a great way to stay in touch with the kind of opportunities and events that happen both on and off campus for people who are interested in the field of communications and how that applies with a professional lens. So I can't thank Chelsea and Casey and Stacia enough for the intelligence that you brought to this conversation, the preparation that you three all clearly showed in the way that you brought your stories, your insights, the themes of the way in which we see one another and the kind of human communication skills that are required, from project management to conflict resolution to navigating ambiguity to marrying what we know are required hard skills, but the necessity of the soft skills and the combination of those two, the human-centered way that we approach career development and career trajectory, really to me is at the heart of the messages that you've shared, and thrilled that we could host it today. Thank you everybody so much for coming. Thanks, Lynn, for doing the Zoom DJing. Liao Zhao, thank you so much for leading up our efforts in outreach for Comm Lead. And have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. And thanks so much for attending.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all. It was an honor to be part of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.